Researcher's writing style. All right, so today we're going to go over how to write, the specific style I want you guys to utilize as you're writing your research papers. All right. So first, remember, when you are quoting a source, when you're making reference to someone, one of the authors, only use the author's last name. And don't mention the title of the work. So, for example, you want to say something like Smith, 1995, stated, and then whatever sentence you're paraphrased. So remember, it is going to be the last name, and then in parentheses, the year the work was published. Don't use the author's whole name. For example, don't say Adam stated. All right. Now, do not cite a source you have not read. So in your paper, there might be a time, you're most likely going to come across other references, other works have cited within your work. I mean, this is a paper made up basically summarizing other research papers who have summarized other research papers. So there is going to be references to other sources within the references that you use. So you only want to cite the source that your reference came from, even if you're citing a different source within that paper. You want to cite the source that you got the source from, that you got the source from, not where they got it from. Now, if you want to go find that primary article and use it and cite that, you're totally open. You're free to do that. But if you're not going to do that, then only cite the source that you got the source from. So like I said, if a paper mentions another source, you only cite the paper that you are reading. Okay. So do not use the phrase "the current study" or "the present study" or "this study" to refer to someone else's work. So as you're reading these papers and you're summarizing them and you're referencing their studies, don't use language. Don't use the language like the current study or the present study or this study. How you would get around that generally is you would simply say the author's last name and the specific subject that you want to talk about, the specific evidence that you want to discuss. All right. Subject of a sentence. So you always want to use a person, the researcher, so their last name essentially as the subject of any sentence. Do not use the product. Do not use the study or the experiment. Do not use the thing that they did as the subject. So always make the subject of the sentence the person or the researcher doing the study whenever possible. And you'll probably see this as you're reading papers. You'll generally see an author saying Smith stated or according to Johnson et al. Or something like that. You're going to see that more so than the study blah 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 blah. You're not going to see that as often, hopefully. All right. So again, like we said, say Smith's study as an example on the slide. You want to say Smith's study or Smith's research. We do not want to say the study by Smith. As we see in the first example, the person is the subject of the sentence. In the second, the object or the product is the subject. We never want to make the product or the research the subject of the sentence. We always want to make the person the subject of the sentence. All right. So, talk about facts. So do not state what the researcher thought or felt or said without evidence. So when I say don't talk about what the researcher thought or felt or believed, that's probably pretty easy to do. If they're just saying things, if they said something, but there's no evidence to back that, then I would avoid that too. So we only want to go with what the researcher said in the paper, and usually that's going to be backed by evidence. Okay. Do not use the word prove. So don't say Smith proved. Do not refer to the author using terms like mentioned, said, or wrote. Also, again, back to prove. So we're in the social sciences, and in the social sciences, we function off of empiricism. So the social sciences are based in empiricism, and empiricism is reliant heavily on inductive reasoning. And with inductive reasoning, we use terms like probability, cogency, things like that. We do not say proof. Proof is more so in the area of mathematics or logic. So social sciences don't prove anything. We show that something is probable, or something is possible within a high amount of probability, or this likely occur within a higher amount of probability, or something like that. Yeah, but we don't say proved. So just delete that word from your vocabulary in this class, unless you are specifically referencing some type of mathematical theorem or theory or something specific or some logical problem or something. Which you most likely are not going to be coming across anything like that. So I will just delete that word from your vocabulary for this class. All right. So next, verbosity and repetition. Avoid using too many words when you could have just used one word. So multiple words. Don't use multiple words when you only need one. So for example, we look at this sentence. Smith's study involved the use of several theoretical frameworks to deduce a resolution to the catastrophic problem rationally outlaid in the introduction. So we don't want to say that. We want to avoid that. That is needlessly excessive. What we would rather say is Smith used several theoretical frameworks. You're saying the same thing, essentially, but like one is much more direct. It's clear, and it's just better. All right. So still on the subject of verbosity. So let's take a phrase like the results reveal that. So do not say this sentence. Instead, begin with the sentence. Begin the sentence with the word that comes after this phrase. So if the sentence starts, the results revealed that. Instead, say, just start with, there was a strong relationship between the variables. So if the sentence starts off with the results revealed that there was a strong relationship between the variables, just say there was a strong relationship between the variables. All right. The data obtained showed. All right. So this is also incorrect and poorly stated, because where does the data come from if it was not obtained by someone? So we know the data was obtained. We don't need to say that it was obtained. So just say the data showed. We don't want to be redundant. All right. So next, the study participants were. Well, yeah, the study participants were in the study. Yeah. So, right, the participants were. Because that's the reason why we call them participants and not individuals, because participants participate in studies. So we don't need to say, we don't need to be redundant by using the word study within that phrase. All right. So because, due to the fact that, so just say because is fine. Because is an okay term, is an okay word to use. If it keeps your sentence, your phrasing short, it's just better to avoid the verbosity and keep it clear and simple. So the reason is because, now people do say this like colloquially, I guess when they're trying to think up an explanation for something that happened or something that they may or may not have done, but or something like the reasons behind why, I guess would be a classy way of saying that. But we don't need to use the term, this term, the reason is because, or the reasons behind why. We can just say the reason is. See how simpler just saying the reason is? We can avoid the verbosity, we can avoid the redundancy. I mean, because like if you can take those two, you can take the reason is and because and make them two separate things. They essentially mean the same thing, at least within this context. All right. So a total of 8 participants. So if you only had 8 participants, just say 8 participants. You don't need to say a total of. We can just start off with 8 participants. All right. The results were statistically significant. So the science the researcher is using is statistics. Thus, the results will be statistically significant. So we do not need to say statistically. We can just say the results were significant. Remember, you don't want to be redundant. All right. So have been previously stated, or has been previously found, sorry. So has been is a past tense verb, meaning that this has happened before. So we do not need to say has been and previously. I would say pick one, but I think it's just saying has been is probably enough. We can avoid the term previously. So again, we do not want to be redundant. All right. So in his study, Smith found. So we know Smith discovered something in his study. He's the subject of the study. Remember that. So don't say in his study, because when we say in his study, Smith found, we're making his study the subject of the sentence. And we never want to do that. We're making the study, the research, the subject. We want to make Smith the subject. So we know that Smith was doing a study. And in the study, we know that there were findings in the study. Whether they're significant or not, we know he found something. So we can pretty much just avoid saying in his study, because we know he was doing a study, because it's a research paper. All right. So we're on redundancy, but distinctly different. Basically mean the same thing. Just pick one. Just pick one of them. You'll be fine. All right. Memory recall. Pick one. Same thing. Just pick one. All right. Now, overuse of the passive voice. Now we're going to get into this. How do you make your sentences active? How do you switch from passive voice to active voice, or do you even just simply avoid using passive voice? So think about what was done and not who did it. And if that as you're switching to active voice, and remember, and think about it. And also, it's easy to modify sentences into the active voice. Okay, for example, participants were, and this is an example in passive voice. Participants were administered a questionnaire. All right, so examiners can administer tests. Think about that. So when we say participants were administered, we're saying something that happened to the participants. That's the passive part. Now, examiners can administer tests. That's active voice. So we can say the examiner administered the test. We can say something like that, but this is not about the examiner. This is about the participant. So therefore, because it is the tests that are administered and not the participants, we would say participants take tests, or participants answer surveys. So say the participant completed a survey. So essentially what we want to think about when we're talking about switching from passive voice to active. Like you said, think about what happened, and we'll think about what happened and think about who did it. Think about what was done and think about who did it. Okay. So in the example where the participants were administered a questionnaire, the examiners administered a questionnaire. So that's, again, one way we could talk about that, but this sentence is not about the examiners. This sentence is about the participants. So we want to make the participants active and not passive. So we'd say the participants completed a questionnaire. Just rewriting a sentence like, because another sentence that would also be active would be the participants took a test, or the participants answered a survey. But a better looking rewrite would be the participants completed a questionnaire. So if you switch that from the participants took a questionnaire or something like that, that's already a step up. That's already better than saying that the participants were administered something or something happened to them. We want to talk about what they did. The subject did something. Okay. So next, the experiment was designed by Smith too. Okay. So again, we have here the subject of the sentence is the experiment. This is passive. This is bad. This is a very, very bad way to start. So this type of structure, this type of structure is easy to translate into active voice. We could say Smith built or designed an experiment to do something. In that way, we're putting Smith as the subject of the sentence, and we're saying what Smith did to something, and not what happened to Smith, or not what happened to his experiment. All right. So slang and colloquial language. So contractions are absolutely forbidden. Do not use don't or can't. While we only use apostrophes to indicate possession, but also remember that there are pronouns that can indicate possession, like his, its, and hers. Use because. Don't be afraid to use because. Being that is a poor substitute. The phrase being that is a poor substitute. Since is also a weak substitute. It's a very weak one. And a very poor substitute for because since refers to after that time, or a specific time. So instead of using since, if you're talking in a temporal sense, use while. Use it like since if you can't replace it with the word simultaneously. If you can't replace the word since with the word simultaneously, use the word while. So also consider although, and, or whereas. Again, also you can use the word and as an alternative instead of while. So the word and can help you avoid long sentences. So just remember that. So quotations longer than 40 words should be indented. And this is pretty easy to figure out, especially nowadays. You can easily just select a sentence and get the word count, or select a quote or phrase, get the word count. If it is over 40 words, then just then indent it and cite it. And yeah, so quotations should be, quotations longer than 40 words should be indented. Quotations shorter than 40 words, while you don't necessarily have to indent them, it should be easy enough for you to rewrite them. So before you translate, before you just take a block quote, do your best to try to paraphrase it. All right, cool. So other things to avoid. Don't refer to yourself as we. Avoid I. Don't address the reader as you. You should place yourself in the background of your paper. It is your ideas and your findings and your research that is important. Also, begin each paragraph with a topic sentence. Do not write one-sentence paragraphs. Do not use hyperbole or overstatement in your professional writing. So don't use terms like tragedy or essential. Like I said, avoid hyperbole and overstatement. All right, so some Latin abbreviations that we're going to come across. So remember that commas are going to go after these. There's usually going to be a period and then a comma. All right, so don't use he or she. Use they or use they there. Avoid situations where you think you should use he or she. Do not leave hyphens alone. Connect the hyphen with the correct word. All right, so these words are the plural of so words like data, criteria, phenomena, stimuli, and hypotheses. These are plural. So anytime you're using the word data, criteria, you're only using them in a sense of when you're talking about multiple facts or multiple things, multiple hypotheses, multiple stimuli, multiple phenomena. You're going to use these words to talk about multiples. So data refers to a lot of data, not just one single piece of data. So if you want to refer to singular versions of these words, you'd say datum. No, datum would refer to just one piece of data. Criterion would refer to maybe one rule or one criterion or one or something like that. Phenomena will refer to like one particular event or something like that. Same thing with stimulus and hypothesis, just one hypothesis. There are hypotheses and there's a hypothesis. Etol is a term you're going to come across. This means et olia, which means other things. Also, et in Latin means and or. So when you are citing multiple authors, this is going to come in handy because you're going to say something like, if we go back to like Smith, 1995, if Smith and like Georgie and Frankie and Lucy also wrote it, we're just going to use Smith and Smith's last name. We're going to say Smith et al. 1985. And that's how we're going to cite papers that have multiple authors. So IE means it est, and this means that is. EG means exempli gratia, and that means for example. All right. Now, also remember back to the final slide. All right. So with that, I think that ends our lecture today. All right. Thank you.